did, and this was Boris Johnson making the point that after what he described as the toughest restrictions in peacetime history, the government was now in a position, as he put it, to make life easier for people. But, and you sounded that note of caution that came from the government, as Boris Johnson said, there will be flare-ups and the government will not hesitate to apply the brakes if is required. Boris Johnson saying that if we can say that this has been the long hibernation is beginning to come to an end, but it is too easy, as he put it, for the frost to return. Trotting through those changes then that we're going to see from July the 4th, it is going to be possible for pubs to open up again, but there will be two main caveats to that. Table service will be required, and when you're going to the pub, you will have to provide the contact details, your contact details, so that if a flare-up of COVID-19 is linked to a particular venue and you have been to that particular venue, it is possible for the track and tracers to get in touch with you and urge you to get a test.
And Theo, it's interesting, isn't it? Because some people have already started saying, well, I'm not going to bother going to the pub if I have to give my name and number when I go. But actually, we do that all the time with restaurant bookings, don't we?
Absolutely. So that's going to be the change. And then places of worship are going to be able to reopen for prayers and services, but with a maximum of 30 people allowed to go at any one time. You heard the chair of Alleluia go up from one MP when that was just regarding the pubs rather than the religious venue. But Boris Johnson insisting that if necessary, then the restrictions will return. Two interesting statistics the Prime Minister used to back up the decision. The first is the number of new infections had fallen the number of new infections is falling between 2 and 4% every day, and now the number of cases in the UK is 1 per 1,700. Previously, it had been 1 per 1,000. The rolling daily average has fallen to 130 as of yesterday, compared to a high of 943 in the middle of April.
It was very striking, wasn't it, to hear Boris Johnson go through that dreadful charting, really, of the height to the height of this infection and the deaths it was causing to the present day, which is still a bad picture, but a better picture. We're going to get ONS figures later this hour, and the FT, who've been tracking the data very closely, estimating that the excess deaths are at 65,000. So Boris Johnson will be aware, won't he, that he has to tell a story that gives people hope when the backdrop is pretty bleak.
Yes, the number the FT are reporting today is their own calculations and modelling, which puts the number of excess deaths at 65,000. Every one of those deaths a tragedy. The number that is interesting to come out of the Office for National Statistics is that for the first time, the total number of deaths in a week period up until the 12th of June has fallen to below 10,000. Now, that is the first time the total number of deaths has fallen this year, has fallen to below 10,000, but it is still up nearly 6% on the same weekly average over the previous 5 years. Just in terms of the detail also announced by Boris Johnson, hairdressers can reopen. It's also going to be possible to stay at a hotel from July the 4th. Ditto campsites, but of course the caveat Boris Johnson putting on that is that shared facilities must be kept clean. Some venues, just to run you through them, which won't be able to open from July the 4th, they're known as close proximity venues: nightclubs, swimming pools, children's soft play, bowling alleys and water parks. The Prime Minister insisting that simply it was impossible to put in place the social distancing measures, and therefore for the moment those venues will have to remain closed. Just in terms of personal bubbles as well, it's going to be possible to meet, for any two households, to meet indoors or outdoors now as a result of the changes being implemented by the government.
And an important addition to that is that you don't have to limit yourself to one household that is the only household you can see. You could meet one household one weekend and a different group of friends or a different grandparent the following weekend.
Yes, and the point you raised there about grandparents grandparents, Sheila, is the pertinent point because, of course, under the previously been announced, you could meet with another family outside, but that relationship had to be exclusive. That was the only family you were allowed to meet with. And of course, many people feeling that they had to choose between sets of grandparents because it wouldn't be possible to meet both sets of grandparents. Of course, under this,
or indeed friends. I mean,
yes.
I mean, grandparents matter so much more. Of course, they do, particularly to little kids, and for everybody's sanity and happiness. But all kinds of pressures and sacrifice have been placed on all kinds of ways, haven't they? As I said yesterday, I'm saving my bubble up until August. I can have two.
You're quite right to mention that. Of course, people having to choose not just between their grandparents, but between a particular friend. And of course, some of those friends might be particularly vulnerable. So you might have friends who have been just living by themselves and very much isolated.
Do I still have you, Theo?
Yes, I'm still here. Sorry, Sheila.
Oh, you are still there. The response from Keir Starmer there saying, mostly welcome what you're saying. We will have some questions. We will want to know the reasoning behind what's open and what isn't. And some of those things, like indoor soft play areas, for example, you can see why we're being cautious about that. Similarly to schools, I suppose. Indoor fitness and gyms, I think you can see why that's tricky. But swimming pools, I think, is an odd one because, you're in a bath of chlorine essentially when you're in a swimming pool. So to open a cinema but not a swimming pool on the basis of it being difficult to keep social distance, well, there's not that easy to keep social distance at a cinema, is it?
So swimming pools come with the changing areas, and there had been some speculation that people would be asked.
But they don't have to.
You're quite right.
Hardly ever use the changing areas.
There had been some speculation that people that would turn up. Would be made to turn up in their costume underneath their clothes and then jump straight into the swimming pool. That had been one idea.
I do that anyway.
That was that had been one idea.
I mean, that is a decision that's been made by a non-swimmer. I'm telling you, because there's no reason swimming pools can't open. In my humble opinion.
Yes, the tone of Keir Starmer was he was trying to strike a conciliatory note with Boris Johnson, acknowledging that any unlocking of the current restrictions carries risks, as he put it. But he also, Sheila, acknowledged that the risks of inaction, as he put it, there was a risk to that. As well. He also addressed Boris Johnson's repeated questions from Prime Minister's questions last week when Boris Johnson asked him whether he supported the reopening of schools. The Labour leader said it was safe to reopen schools for some children, but he again made the point that there needed to be a full test, track and trace system in place, concluding the Labour leader that he welcomed the thrust of the Prime Minister's statement.